Today we're here. I want to thank everyone that has worked so hard to craft the legislation that we're unveiling today, especially the Colorado District Attorney's Council, the Public Defender's Office, as well as the bipartisan co-prime sponsors. To Representative Lynch, to Senator Cook, to Senator Pedersen, thank you so much for all of your work. I've been working hand in hand with Colorado's district attorneys to craft a comprehensive solution that attacks fentanyl from all sides and gives law enforcement the tools they need to crack down on this deadly poison. This bill will include proven public health strategies to address the root causes of this crisis, as well as increased penalties to get those who are peddling this poison off of the streets. Fentanyl overdoses and fentanyl poisonings are killing far too many Coloradans and devastating our communities. Fentanyl is unlike any drug we've seen before, and we need to treat it differently. The way that people are losing their lives from this drug is different from other overdose deaths, because in many cases the victims don't even know that they've taken the drug. It's being laced in all kinds of other drugs with deadly, deadly effects. This legislation aims to save Coloradans' lives. The dealers peddling death in our communities will be held accountable. This bill gives law enforcement and the prosecutors the tools they need to put dangerous fentanyl dealers behind bars. Low-level dealers, mid-level dealers, and high-level dealers. All are contributing to this crisis that we're seeing throughout our communities. They will face stiff consequences. Let me be clear. Distribution that leads to death will be a level 1 drug felony. When a dealer kills someone with what they've sold, that dealer is going to face very serious charges. Drug dealers will have to know what they are selling and will be held accountable when that fentanyl-laced drug leads to someone's death. If law enforcement finds a pill press, the device used to manufacture compound fentanyl pills, that dealer will face a level 1 drug felony. We also significantly are increasing the penalties for people caught importing the drug to Colorado. We are going to go after the distribution networks, the dealers, and the people bringing these laced drugs into our state while not criminalizing people who are struggling with substance abuse. Our plan will help cut off the supply and eliminate the demand by getting people the help that they need. This bill includes millions of dollars for proven and effective public health strategies that will help keep people alive and give them the tools they need to protect themselves. In this bill, we are using federal ARPA dollars to help boost the supply of life-saving Narcan and boost treatment solutions for people struggling with substance use disorders. Through this comprehensive solution, we know that we will have the resources to help on the public health side, while at the same time relying on other bills that are making their way through this legislative session to build out the workforce and the access to our behavioral health network that will help address the root cause of addiction. Colorado will be safer if this bill is signed into law. It's an honor to stand before you. We have a lot of work to do to make sure that this bill gets across the finish line. But I want to thank everyone who's standing behind me. I want to thank everybody who's had a hand in crafting this legislation. And with that, it's my honor to hand it off to Governor Polis, the governor of the great state of Colorado. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Really, I'm proud to stand here with a very broad coalition, people from across the state, law enforcement, parents who've experienced lost, DAs, Republicans, Democrats, people who don't care about politics at all, people who care a lot, because we all are really speaking with one voice that it's time for Colorado to do something and to get tough on fentanyl. It's part of making Colorado a safer state for everybody. And it's time for the carnage to end. There's no one single bill or reform that can end the fentanyl problem or the drug problem in Colorado. But this effort will absolutely go a long way by giving prosecutors the ability to go after additional criminal charges for fentanyl, for those distributing it, for people who have pill presses, And I also appreciate that it's comprehensive. It gets more testing kits in the field to identify fentanyl earlier and for investigators to be able to trace it back and hold the sources accountable under the law rather than have to follow a trail of bodies when it's too late. I want to thank all of those in attendance. You'll hear from many of them here today, including, and I want to thank them for joining us. I'm also proud to be joined by our own Lieutenant Governor, Diane Primavera, also the head of the Office of Saving People Money on Healthcare. Fentanyl is something that affects everyone in every community across our state. Quite simply, far too many families have experienced loss and tragedy from the impact of fentanyl. It ruins lives, it causes deaths, and what this effort is about is recognizing in law that it is different and should be treated differently under the law than other illicit substances. And that's completely appropriate, because as you try to form the right public policy response for a particular drug, you look at what that drug does. And one thing we know about fentanyl is fentanyl kills. I know that we're all sick and tired of hearing the news of yet another life that's lost because of fentanyl. It's why in my State of the State I called for stronger criminal penalties, and why today's rollout is so important. After thoughtful collaboration and months of conversations with law enforcement, with prosecutors, with public health experts, with community leaders, led by Speaker Garnett and other legislators, this legislation truly begins to address the scourge of fentanyl in our communities, and its legacy will be saving lives and holding criminals accountable. This bill will help get distributors off the street. It'll provide law enforcement the resources to address fentanyl, and it also makes sure that it provides a path for help for those who are addicted. Another key component of this legislation is public education and awareness around preventing overdoses and giving Coloradans better tools to stay safe. We all wish that there was a silver bullet, and we see a wide variety of states with a wide variety of policies, and there's tragic loss in every one. However, I am confident that this thoughtful policy, with the input of law enforcement, prosecutors, community activists from across the state, will help reduce the death toll from fentanyl in Colorado and gives us better strategies to really attack this issue in a strong way from every single angle. I look forward to this legislation moving through the process and look forward to celebrating a day where we know that we can make Colorado that much safer. With that, I'll turn it over to former Sheriff and Senator John Cook.
Good morning. Thank you for all being here, and thank you to the families and other dignitaries here. Thank you. My name is Senator John Cook. I represent Senate District 13, and I'm from Greeley. And I'm proud to be sponsoring this legislation with Speaker Garnett, Representative Lynch, and Senator Patterson. Every community in Colorado is combating the fentanyl crisis, and they need our help. This deadly drug is unlike anything we've seen before, and that means we need new tools to address it. This legislation is comprehensive. Sheriffs and law enforcement need new tools to hold dealers accountable for distributing deadly fentanyl, and we're going to give it to them. We're going to give them what they need. This bill treats fentanyl like the dangerous drug that it is and significantly strengthens the criminal penalties for dealing it. Going after the dealers will crack down on fentanyl and prevent more people from dying. As a former sheriff, I know our jails are not just part of the criminal justice system, but now are part of the behavioral health system as well. This bill boosts funding to help our jails get people clean, so when they complete their sentence and return to the community, they can sustain a successful recovery and reduce their chances of being arrested again. It also provides our jails with bulk pricing discounts for life-saving Narcan, so they can act quickly to prevent overdoses and poisoning and give people tools to protect themselves when they leave jail. By lowering the cutoff points for charging for intent to distribute, we are providing a significant tool to law enforcement to break up crime rings and hold dealers at every level accountable for the deaths that they are spreading in our communities. The cutoff points are coming way down, which is critical if we are going to go ahead and go after the people responsible for deaths we're seeing in our state. You might ask, why is this bill needed? I think we all know, but there is a rising spike in fentanyl deaths in our community. It's shocking and not surprising, though. In 2015, 5 Coloradoans died as a result of fentanyl. In 2021, close to 900, 875 to be exact, died of fentanyl. In just 1 year, from April 2020 to April 21, fentanyl overdoses and poisoning increased by 24%, an unprecedented spike. It is abundantly clear we must take action to address this crisis and this legislation is a critical step in that. This bill aims to thwart the accessibility of fentanyl-laced drugs on our streets by severely punishing those who peddle fentanyl into our communities and providing resources for first responders and community organizers and organizations that are working to mitigate the devastating effect of this drug. When passed, anyone who imports fentanyl, distributes fentanyl, laced drugs with fentanyl, possesses a pill press, or possesses fentanyl with the intent to distribute will be charged with a felony. If we want to stop this drug from ravaging our streets and killing people, we must be tough on the criminals who are peddling it into our communities and make it abundantly clear we will no longer tolerate the free flow of fentanyl to our streets. This bill will also issue a misdemeanor and require a mandatory addiction evaluation for anyone caught with under 4 grams. This legislation will also aim to reduce overdose deaths and poisoning, providing vital public education and providing opioid antagonists and test kits to the public. We will work not as Republicans or Democrats, but as concerned Coloradoans who want to bring an end to this ongoing crisis that is doing harm to our communities across our state. Thank you, and I'd like to introduce Senator Patterson from Jefferson County.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here today to cover this incredibly important issue. You know that we are facing the worst overdose crisis in our history. That is partly because we have a broken behavioral health care system that so many that are with us today have dedicated years and millions of dollars in fixing. And we are also seeing a significant increase in fentanyl deaths. In fact, from 2015 until now, we've had a 1,008% increase of fentanyl deaths. So I'm proud to stand today as a sponsor in the Senate for this bill. You all know my story. I come at this from a perspective of empathy because of my mom. She became addicted to opioids when I was very young, which ultimately led to a heroin addiction. In 2017, my mom started overdosing at a very high rate. And that's when everything changed and she was begging for help. In 1 year, she went to the ER 20 times for an overdose. And the last time that she visited the hospital, she overdosed 3 times in 1 day. That was partly because of the spiral of the addiction that she was in, but it was mostly because that's when we really started to see fentanyl enter the drug supply chain here in Colorado. I had the opportunity to visit Canada with Representative Harrod, and we met with the local public health agencies, with law enforcement, to learn about what they're doing in Canada to address their overdose crisis. And the law enforcement agencies and the folks that we met with warned us about what was going to be happening and what they have seen firsthand in Canada, which was there was no longer heroin. They were able to mitigate some of the deaths with some of their harm reduction strategies and increasing access to treatment, but they were starting that because of drug cartels and their smuggling of fentanyl into Canada, there was no longer heroin on the street, and they had a huge increase in overdose deaths. They said, this is coming to the United States, this is coming to the rest of the world, and they warned us of what the future here was going to look like. And here we are today. So what I really appreciate about this bill is that it is not a knee-jerk reaction to trying to criminalize people who are addicted and have possession of drugs. This is coming at it with an approach of empathy, with increasing treatment to medication-assisted treatment, to substance use disorder treatment, making sure that we have test strips available. But also, it comes with an approach of accountability for those who knowingly are distributing fentanyl and are poisoning people across Colorado. When I think about the world that my son will grow up in, he's 2 years old right now. And behind me are many parents here holding pictures, and sisters and brothers and loved ones who are holding pictures of the people that they have lost who were poisoned. They didn't know that they were taking fentanyl. They thought they were taking a Xanax, maybe bought cocaine, and maybe they made some decisions that we all hope they wouldn't, but they didn't think that they were going to buy fentanyl. And they were poisoned. We saw the story in Adams County of the group of people who were doing cocaine, and numerous people died that night. So what I appreciate about this bill is it gives law enforcement the tools to investigate and hold those individuals accountable, but it also approaches this with empathy and understanding. The other pieces that I want to point out is that this bill is not, as the governor pointed out, this is not all that we are going to do here in Colorado to address this issue. It's not just addiction. Like we said, this is people being poisoned, and we have a public awareness campaign around this. This is a critical piece. Thinking about my son growing up in Colorado, in the United States, where you think that you make a decision to buy a pill, you think that you might make that bad decision, but you don't know that you're buying fentanyl. And so it's really important that this piece is not just the other comprehensive pieces that I've talked about, but also a public awareness campaign so that individuals across Colorado know what's at stake. When you listen to law enforcement, and you'll hear a lot of stories today, they say that there is not a drug out there now that doesn't have fentanyl. That is cocaine, that is marijuana, that is heroin. And so we really need to do our part, and I'm proud of this bill for actually trying to bring attention to what the dangers out there just from taking one pill, that you unfortunately could lose your life. So I really want to thank everybody for coming together on this with the comprehensive approach that is taking, as well as the other behavioral health care reform bills that we're working on. With that, I will pass it on to DA Sides.
Good morning. My name is Travis Sides. I'm the district attorney for the 13th Judicial District. Our office represents the 7 counties in Northeast Colorado. In the past few years, all of our communities, metro and rural, large and small, have felt the deadly impacts of fentanyl, and things are only getting worse by the day. Young people think they're getting oxycodone, but really, they're getting a pill laced with poison. This legislation is a much-needed step in the right direction. By increasing penalties for those who take human lives by selling fentanyl-laced drugs, while there's still a lot to be done and room for more, I'm very thankful to Speaker Garnett and the Colorado Legislature that they're taking up this important issue. We must protect our communities from those who would cause them harm. Thank you. I'll now turn things over to Representative Lynch.
Thank you for being here this morning. I'm Representative Lynch, House District 49, the rural parts of northern parts of the state. But the real reason we're here is because of these families that are here. We're here because in this state, we are losing innocent lives we went through a pandemic, now we have an epidemic. And what we're dealing with is something that we've never dealt with before. This is the next step that we're seeing occur in drug use. And so that's why this bill, that I'm very honored to be on, takes an innovative approach to fix the problem quickly, fix it now, and address this horrific issue. You've heard all the specifics of the bill. I'm just excited. This is not a partisan issue. This is a leadership issue. This is where we come together as a state to find and fix problems, and I'm honored to be a part of it. I will now turn it over to Arette Gallegos.
Hi, my name is Arette Gallegos. Thank you. On April 14th, (2021), sorry. That's the day our lives changed forever. That is the day that we lost our beautiful Brianna to fentanyl poisoning. She was a loving daughter, wife, and mother, a caring sister, a friend. Brianna did not want to die. And would never have wanted to leave her son, Aaron, who she loved more than life itself. Aaron and April, her dog, were her everything. Brianna's life hadn't been an easy one. She was sexually assaulted by someone she trusted, and that trauma stayed with her for a long time, eventually leading her down a darker path. Like so many who have suffered abuse, Brianna looked for ways to numb her pain, and she turned to alcohol and Percocet. She knew she needed help, and we had been talking a lot about finally seeking therapy and treatment to deal not only with substance abuse issues, but with the traumas that were lying at the root of it. The day before she died, we were so excited because she had finally been able to make an appointment to seek help, but the appointment would be too late. Brianna was poisoned later that night. My whole family and I remember that night like it was yesterday. We wake up every day reliving the same nightmare, that she is gone, and that nobody has faced any punishment for taking her away. There was never an investigation. Authorities treated her death as an overdose and moved on. My daughter had her battles, just like every one of us. But her life mattered. Her death also mattered as much as any of those you have seen on the news recently. The difference is that Brianna's death was never investigated. But we have her phone, we have her messages, we know who gave her the pill, and we know that Brianna thought she was buying Percocet. And we now know that it was fentanyl and that it was deadly. Take a moment to imagine that this was your child. Wouldn't you want their death investigated? Wouldn't you want to see consequences for the person who sold them a poisoned pill? We need to make sure we are putting money towards the investigation of fentanyl poisonings and the drug dealers who are selling it. Fentanyl poisonings do not discriminate. It could very well happen to your child. It could happen to any of our children. April 14th, 2021, that's the day Brianna lost her voice to speak out. But I won't let her voice be lost. I will speak out for her, and not just for her, but for her husband and her son and her siblings. We will not be silent until someone is held to account for these poisonings. Thank you.
Well, thank you everyone for being here. I'm State Representative Leslie Herod. I represent House District 8 in Denver. Hard for me to give my prepared remarks after hearing that. We are here because too many people are dying from fentanyl poisonings. I too share Senator Pedersen's comments. I have a family member also who was caught up in addiction. My sister, who was sexually assaulted, the age of 15, turned to drugs became an addict very young. We did not know why. We did not know she was sexually assaulted. But we do know that she turned to drugs and stayed in and out of the criminal justice system for about 30 years. I am lucky to say that she is here with us. She is recovered. She's working. She's taking care of her family. But in my heart of hearts, I know that if she went through the struggle now that she did then, that she too would have been poisoned by this fentanyl. Because addicts don't ask first what's in this pill before they're fixed. And folks who are using things like Ritalin or Percocet, they are not intending to die. But because this deadly drug is in every single street drug across Colorado, that is the risk that we're seeing on the streets right now. I have friends who have died of fentanyl poisoning recently. They did not have access to testing strips. They did not have enough Narcan to bring someone back from a fentanyl overdose. This bill marries a public safety approach with a harm reduction and public health approach. We know that dealers, high-level dealers who are knowingly bringing fentanyl into our communities and mixing it into drugs and selling that to our community members, our parents, our kids, our families, they should have very stiff consequences. And those who are addicted, like my sister, they deserve a road to recovery. They deserve real access to mental health and substance misuse supports. They deserve the choice to know if there's fentanyl in their drugs. This bill gets at that, providing testing strips, providing access to Narcan, providing support for Good Samaritans who are just trying to get their friends help. This is not an easy bill. And I gotta say, the speaker has done amazing work to try to get all sides of this conversation to the table, to come up with a solution that's right for Colorado. Is everyone happy? No. But this is a solution that will work. We have to hold people accountable who are bringing fentanyl into our communities, and we need to do more to get people access to the resources that they need. One thing that the governor has mentioned, and has mentioned time and time again, mentioned it in his State of the State, what we cannot do is go back to the failed policies of the past. The war on drugs did not work, but that doesn't mean that we turn a blind eye to dealers and cartels either. We have to provide the resources that are needed to crack down on these criminals, and we have to provide treatment to folks. I was recently speaking to someone who was in community corrections, and I said, what could we have done to keep you from coming here in the first place? And what do we need to do to make sure that you never come back? This woman looked at me and said, I had been struggling with addiction for years and had committed low-level crimes for years, but could not get into this treatment program because I wasn't a felon yet. If I would have gotten treatment that she apparently asked for early on but couldn't afford, her family would have been intact. She wouldn't be in the system today, and she would be, I believe, on that road to recovery that she now is on much sooner. This bill addresses that. And I want to make clear that while no bill is a panacea, this legislature is doing more than just introducing this. We are wrapping around hundreds of millions of dollars in mental health and substance misuse support to people who need it right here in Colorado, a historic investment that we have never seen before, to really get at the root cause of desperation, of despair, depression, and why people turn to drugs in the first place. We're also working to infuse dollars into the workforce because however many beds we put in Colorado, if there's no one there to offer that counseling, that support, that has that training they need to help, it won't do any good. We're also investing in that. So make no mistake, cracking down on fentanyl and saving lives is a priority of this legislature. This bill shows that commitment. But this entire package of work that has been going on for months between the governor's office, the House, the Senate, law enforcement officers who are here today, harm reductionists, and public health officials show our true commitment to ensure that no one else dies from a fentanyl overdose and that no one else is not held accountable when they murder someone in our communities. And with that, I'm going to turn the microphone over to DA Mason. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Brian Mason. I'm the district attorney for Colorado's 17th Judicial District, which includes Adams and Broomfield counties. Fentanyl is killing our kids. Fentanyl is killing our kids. And it is also killing the parents of our kids. And nobody knows this pain more than the parents who are behind me today and than my community of Adams County, where we had one single incident where 5 people died from fentanyl poisoning. At the moment, it's the largest incident in the country, but it won't be for long. No drug is safe right now. No drug is safe. We are finding fentanyl in cocaine. We are finding it in heroin. We are finding it in meth. We're finding it in oxycodone. And in limited circumstances, we're even finding it in marijuana. Fentanyl is poisoning our kids, and dealers are peddling this poison to unwitting victims. This bill is a huge step forward for holding accountable those who are peddling this poison. Right now in the state of Colorado, we don't have a distribution of fentanyl causing death statute. That means I, as a prosecutor, if I have someone who has distributed a drug with fentanyl in it that causes someone to die, I can't hold them accountable for that death. This bill will allow me to do that. No bill is perfect, and we got lots of work to do. But this bill is going to help us get some fentanyl off the streets, and most importantly, get dealers of this poison into prison, which in this case is where they belong. Thank you. Now I'll introduce my colleague, fellow DA, Gordon McLaughlin.
Good morning, Gordon McLaughlin, District Attorney in the 8th Judicial District, Larimer and Jackson counties. Thank you to Speaker Garnett and Governor Polis on the Colorado District Attorney's Council for working on this bill, and thank you so much to all the families that are here. That means a lot about the importance of this bill and what we are trying to accomplish. In my role as an elected district attorney, and prior to that as my role as a prosecutor with the Northern Colorado Drug Task Force, I have seen the breathtaking rise of fentanyl in our community in Larimer County, and with it, tragically, the rise in overdose deaths. It is a crisis, and it is something we need to act now and act aggressively on. This is a bipartisan bill, and I'm proud to have Republican and Democratic colleagues from the legislature here today, and Republican and Democratic colleagues in the DA community here today as well, whom all agree that action is needed and action is needed now. One of the reasons I support this bill is because this bill gives us the tools, new tools, to make an impact on this fentanyl crisis. And I don't mean we in the prosecutor's offices or we in the law enforcement community. I mean we as an entire community, because it's going to take an entire community to deal with this issue. This bill spans the spectrum from treatment, education, and prevention resources, and tens of millions of dollars towards those efforts, to tools for prosecutors to combat the worst offenders among us. And it's that entire community effort that it's going to take to make an impact on this crisis, because we've frankly never seen anything like this before. The lethality of fentanyl is remarkable, and the growth is remarkable, and we need these new tools to combat it. Allowing prosecutors to prosecute those causing death from distribution in our community is an essential tool that will help every DA's office around this state. There are folks out there knowingly peddling fentanyl, poisoning folks in our community, and profiting off it. And this bill will give us the tools to hold those people accountable, while at the same time preventing and educating those so that we reduce the impact of fentanyl and drug addiction in our community. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Matt Riviere, and on July 25th, 2021, I lost my only two sons to fentanyl poisoning. Andrew was 21 and Stephen was 19. And my boys were about 20 months apart, and they were good-hearted kids who were just trying to figure out their life. Both had some degree of mental health illness. Andrew was bipolar, and Stephen struggled with anxiety and depression on a much lesser degree. They were the best of friends and worst of enemies growing up. They had a great childhood, and we had a stable and very fun family. We engaged with our boys and had open conversations throughout their short lives. My boys started their drug journey using flavored vape, which turned to vaping nicotine, which turned to pot, which turned to dabbing, which ended with them trying what they thought was oxycodone. It turned out to be counterfeit and was laced with fentanyl. Before my boys passed, tomorrow will mark 8 months. I had heard of fentanyl, but I didn't know anything about it. And it seems since then, every day I read or see an article or hear a story about how this drug continues to take so many lives. And these deaths are not faceless statistics. They are our sons, they're our daughters, our aunts, our uncles, our spouses. They're our loved ones. And every day I see pictures of my boys throughout my home. I see their innocent faces as babies to small, rambunctious boys, to young men who were deeply loved by me, their mom, and so many others. Their urns on my fireplace are a constant reminder of how their lives were tragically and unexpectedly taken from them. And yes, they made a stupid choice. They'd be the first to admit it if we could talk to them today. But they should have never died experimenting with what they thought was a non-deadly drug. They were poisoned. They were killed. And they were murdered by greedy people who have no regard for human life. I know nothing will bring my boys back to me, but I owe it to them to share their story so we can save some by speaking out, raising awareness, and enacting legislation to turn the tide of this deadly evil that is destroying our youth and our nation. We cannot be silent in our suffering. And what we say and do now echoes in eternity. Thank you.
Thanks to everyone who spoke, especially the parents who shared their tragic stories. Happy to take a few questions. Marianne. Yeah, thanks, Marianne. Listen, this is the beginning of the legislative journey, and hours and hours of conversations have gone into getting us to this point. There's a lot of people to thank for the bill that's going to be before you, but of course, when it comes to making sure that people have the resources to go after those deadly drug dealers, that those resources are there. I think it's important to know that the cut points have changed in the bill that's before you. The cut points for fentanyl possession with intent to distribute currently are 0 to 14 grams for a DF3, a drug felony 3, 14 grams to 225 grams, which is half a pound of fentanyl compound mixture, and a DF1 for anything over 225 pounds. In the bill that will be introduced, those cut points have changed from 0 to 4 for the DF3, from 4 to 50 for the DF2, and anything over 50 being the DF1. Those are significant changes that will provide the tools to law enforcement and district attorneys to make sure that they hold the people accountable that you heard about, and make sure that those dealers are taken off the streets. But in terms of looking at the investigations piece, and of course, like any bill going through the legislative process, always open to those conversations.
We've already started to hear some of the criticism about this bill. Wondering if this bill goes far enough. One of the points in particular, those cut points that you're talking about, saying that 4 grams could kill 2,000 people.
I think there's, and again, this is why the education piece is so important, and that's what's in the bill. We are not talking about pure fentanyl, okay? Pure fentanyl cannot be tested by any lab in the state of Colorado. CBI cannot test whether or not this powder, what percentage of it is fentanyl. There are 2 DEA labs nationwide that do drug testing. They cannot test what percentage of a powder is fentanyl. So this idea that we're talking about pure fentanyl is a little bit of a misnomer, and it's important that we provide that education to everybody, and that's why there's an education campaign on the statewide basis, and there's a grant program for community level education. We are very clear in this legislation that we have changed everything to compound mixture. So if fentanyl is found in any substance, if you have cocaine and it gets tested for fentanyl, it is not cocaine anymore, it is fentanyl. And so the idea that 0 to 4 grams of compound mixture fentanyl for distribution with possession with intent to distribute isn't strong enough. We have moved that cut point down 10 grams. When I talked to the District Attorney's Council, and I want to thank Representative Lynch for his leadership in bringing this conversation forward about possession with intent to distribute, the conversation was moving it from 14 to 7. We've moved it from 14 to 4. So anybody who thinks that the tools that we're giving law enforcement to go after these drug dealers isn't strong enough, they are stronger than the people who came to me to begin with wanted to go, and that's because of the seriousness of fentanyl.
Speaker, may I ask a question of the governor?
I mean, I only get to do this a little bit, but yeah, of course, the governor's saying.
Governor Tony Covalescu with Denver 7. In recent weeks, we focused on an individual arrested with 20,000 pills of fentanyl by an undercover Denver police officer. Within hours, he was given a $10,000 bond, wrote a check for $1,000, essentially a cost of doing business, walked away and has avoided any accountability. 2 years ago, lawmakers in this very building brought you a bill that you signed lessening the penalties for drug dealers. In hindsight, was that a mistake?
If somebody is caught with 20,000 pills with fentanyl, they should go to jail for a long, long time, and that's exactly what this bill does.
Was it a mistake to sign that 2 years ago?
Look, again, we need harsher criminal penalties against those that are poisoning people, and that's exactly what this bill does. Do criminal penalties deter everybody from crime? If they did, we wouldn't have crime. They don't. But they're a tool in the toolbox that prosecutors need and that law enforcement needs to make sure that somebody who's poisoning community members is locked up for a long, long time.
Mr. Speaker,
yep.
We heard about how difficult it can be to get treatment, and obviously, separately, the legislature is working on expanding substance abuse treatment, but how long will it be before people can have easy and accessible treatment for substance abuse? Like, how long is that going to take?
Yeah, I want to thank Representative Herod and Representative Pedersen for their discussion about the amount of resources we're pouring into the mental and behavioral health care system across the state. You know, the difference here in this piece of legislation is that we are requiring that people who are suffering from fentanyl addiction to get an evaluation and to get that treatment. This is a unique way that Colorado has never moved forward on before to help those most in need suffering from substance abuse. I think that in combination with what's in the legislation that we're going to be introducing with all of the orbital bills, we're going to be in a place to make the most significant transformational change in Colorado's mental and behavioral health system in our history.
Do you think we'll see that substantially improved in a year or 2 years?
The timing is, listen, it's going to go as fast as possible. Those dollars are going to move immediately when the bills are signed into law. And so, it's not going to be tomorrow, especially when you're moving that amount of dollars, but it's going to be very, very fast. One more question. Faith.
Speaker, how does or does it at all play into this, the factor of intent? Like, let's say someone has pills they're selling,
Yeah.
they may not know that there's fentanyl in them. Does that
Yeah.
factor into their sentence?
Yeah, great question, Faith. So the question is, if you don't know you're dealing fentanyl, are you still held accountable for dealing fentanyl? And the answer is yes, and it should be that way because we cannot shield drug dealers from not knowing the deadly poisons that they're dealing. So yes, if you are dealing fentanyl, you're going to be held accountable for fentanyl. And when it comes to intent, we have a lot of district attorneys here. We've talked to a lot of law enforcement. Moving those cut points is going to help get to Tony's question and making sure that that person who has 20,000 pills is facing a DF1, which is very significant and includes mandatory sentencing. Thank you all very much for coming. Thanks to all the families and all the speakers.